To proceed, my dear respected brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in His glorious book, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. The purpose of our existence, dear brothers and sisters, is to perform righteous deeds, which worship falls under. Our value in the sight of Allah is determined by our righteous deeds. When man nears his end, he regrets nothing but righteous deeds which he failed to perform. After death, nobody asks to return to tick off the tasks on their bucket list, but rather ask to return to do righteous deeds. قال رب ارجعوني لعلي أعمل صالحا فيما تركت. Until when death comes unto one of them, he says, my Lord, send me back that I may act righteously in what I have left behind. And righteous deeds are as numerous as there are people, meaning that the paths to Allah Ta'ala are as many as there are people. But there are, of course, deeds which are weightier on the scales and more beloved to Allah Ta'ala than others. And so the believer must seek out the righteous deeds which yield the highest rewards and lead to the loftiest stations in paradise. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu did not create us to serve our own interests. Rather, He made us to serve others. Serving our own interest is only permitted in order to strengthen, to enable us to see to our major task and role on earth, which is vicegerency, being Allah's stewards on earth. He said to the malaika, to the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I am appointing a vicegerent on earth. And he said to Dawood, يا داود إنا جعلناك خليفة في الأرض فاحكم بين الناس بالحق ولا تتبع الهوى فيضلك عن سبيل الله. O David, we have appointed you as a vicegerent in the land, so judge between mankind with the truth, and do not follow desire, lest it misguide you from the way of Allah. Justice, which is the result of ruling with the truth, and which Allah has commanded us to observe, is defined, justice is defined as putting everything in its rightful place. Giving people their rights is putting things in their rightful place. Most people are able to claim their rights, compelling you as an authority to respond to their demands. But some people, due to weakness within them, are unable to appeal for their rights. These are society's most vulnerable members. Seeing to their needs is more than just justice, because nothing can compel you to see to their needs except your fear of Allah Jalla Jalaluh. Allah Ta'ala called Himself Al-Qayyum. Al-Qayyum, as Imam Al-Ghazali defined, means that Allah is the sustainer of Himself and of all things in existence. He is the self-subsisting. He manages everything that is in creation. All of His creation needs Him, while He is self-existing and completely free from any dependence or need of anything or anyone else. Al-Qayyum sustains, protects, oversees, provides for, watches over, and manages all that exists. All of creation's existence is dependent upon Him. The sky and the earth, mountains and the trees, the sun and the moon, and all people and animals. Allah Ta'ala said, أَفَمَنْ هُوَ قَائِمٌ عَلَى كُلِّ نَفْسٍ. And what's implied here is the question, is there any equal to the one who is a maintainer of every soul? A maintainer of every soul. He is qa'im, because he is al-qayyum. He is the maintainer. He watches over every soul by creating it, maintaining it, providing for it and sustaining it. Allah Ta'ala is pleased with the believer who helps his brothers and sisters in their need, who helps take care of someone's affairs, and who brings ease to people experiencing difficulty. Now, the greater the person's difficulty, the greater the reward for alleviating it. In fact, not only is the reward so great, but it rivals and equals the reward of prayer at night and fasting during the day. As the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, the one who strives to look after a widow or a poor person is like the one who fights in the cause of Allah, or like the one who performs prayer all the night and fasts all the day. Nobody, my dear respected brothers and sisters, experiences more difficulty, or is in more of a desperate situation, or is more vulnerable than the orphan, the yatim. The Sharia defines the orphan as the child who has lost their father or both of their parents. The boy ceases to be defined as an orphan after his bulugh, after reaching maturity, sexual maturity, meaning puberty. And the girl continues to be categorized as a yatima, an orphan, until she marries. Allah Ta'ala has encouraged us to take a share of His name, Al-Qayyum, because we all have a share of Allah's names. He encouraged us to take a share of this name and oversee the upbringing and maintenance of orphans. Management of the orphans' affairs does not stop at providing for them their material needs, such as their food and drink and clothing and accommodation, but extends to every aspect of their life, including their education, their religious teaching, guidance and moral supervision. Watching over the orphans' upbringing and seeing to their needs is an expression of mercy, rahmah, compassion, loyalty, chivalry, muru'ah, and bir, which is beneficence. Thawban radiyallahu anhu, one of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's companions, came to him one day looking skinny and exhausted and depressed, and it was visible on his face. And so the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "What ails you?" He said, "O Messenger of Allah, I have no illness, but I sit with you, but I am distant from you. And then when I think about you when I'm at home, I feel sick. I feel lovesick because I'm distant from you. And so I come to see your face and my worries disappear. And my yearning for you is satisfied." And then I remembered that in the akhirah, you will be joined with the prophets, and we will never attain such a station. And so it ailed me and saddens me that I will not be with you in the akhirah. And so Allah Jalla Jalaluhu revealed to His Messenger, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. And whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, those will be with the ones upon whom Allah bestowed favor from the prophets, the Siddiqeen, the steadfast affirmers of the truth, the martyrs and the righteous, and excellent are those as companions. That was the eagerness, my dear respected brothers and sisters, of the companions to be with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hereafter. Now what about us? We didn't get to see him in our life. Should we not then do everything within our means and capacity to be with him in the akhirah? The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said in the hadith reported by Abu Hurairah, كَافِلُ الْيَتِيمِ لَهُ أَوْ لِغَيْرِهِ أَنَا وَهُوَ كَهَاتَيْنِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. He said, the caretaker of the orphan, whether he is his relative or a stranger to him, I and him are like this in Jannah, pointing to his index finger and middle finger, leaving a small gap between them. Allah has stressed the rights of the orphan who used to be sold into slavery, The orphan whose inheritance would be usurped. His home would be stolen. His land would be invaded. His future would be ruined. The command to maintain the orphan was issued to all of the nations, not just to this ummah, the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah tells us in the Qur'an, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ. And recall when we took the covenant from the children of Israel, enjoining upon them, do not worship except Allah, and to your parents do good, and to relatives, orphans and the needy. Providing for the orphan is of the difficult paths, difficult routes which we have to traverse if we want to escape the hellfire and be guided to paradise. Allah Ta'ala said, فَلَقَتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ وَمَا أَدَرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ أَوْ إِطْعَامٌ فِي يَوْمٍ ذِي مَسْغَبَةٍ يَتِيمًا ذَا مَقْرَبَةٍ أَوْ مِسْكِينًا ذَا مَتْرَبَةٍ. But he did not brave the difficult route. And what can make you realize what the difficult route is? So what is the difficult route? Allah tells us the difficult route, the one that takes patience and resolve to remain upon in traversing it, that leads us to paradise. The difficult route, my dear brothers and sisters, it is freeing of the slave or feeding on the day of severe hunger the orphaned relative or a needy person in misery. To feed on a day when you are hungry, not when they are hungry. When you're hungry, you feed. That's not easy. But that's the path to paradise. Caring for the orphan, my dear respected brothers and sisters, is a form of saving life. The reward which is equal to that of saving all of mankind. Caring for the orphan strengthens and preserves the ummah. The orphan child is no less significant than our own children. Neglecting them creates resentment within them, which can manifest in them seeking revenge from an oppressive society which abandoned them when they needed help most. And so, no orphan can be described as a monster when a society did not make a saint out of him. And so, from a purely selfish perspective, mistreatment of the orphan is at our own peril, dear brothers and sisters. Allah Ta'ala characterized those who disbelieve in Him and the final day as those who don't treat the orphan well. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Have you seen the one who denies the recompense, the account on the day of judgment? فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمِ. That is the one who drives away or pushes aside or mistreats. All of these meanings apply. Mistreats the orphan. Orphans, dear brothers and sisters, are a test of our humanity, our trustworthiness, and our faith. Because they are easy prey. It's said, it's like taking, when something is easy to take, what is the analogy given? It's like taking candy from a baby's hand. Well, what about the inheritance of a child? It's easy to take. And it is from the gravest, most dangerous of sins. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, اجتنبوا السبع الموبقات. Avoid the 7 great destructive sins, the 7 greatest sins. They said, and what are they, O Messenger of Allah? He said, الشرك بالله, associating a partner with Allah. والسحر, practicing sorcery. وقتل النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق, and taking a life without due course, without right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has listed. وَأَكْلُ الرِّبَى, consuming usury. وَأَكْلُ مَالِ الْيَتِيمِ, and devouring the wealth of the orphan. وَالتَّوَلِّي يَوْمَ الزَّحْفِ, and fleeing on the battlefield. وَقَذْفُ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ الْغَافِلَاتِ, and to cast rumors or slanderous accusations against the unknowing, believing, chaste women. They are the orphans, exploited and abused because of their weakness, made to do manual labor and live a life of servitude in many countries around the world until today. because they have no one to support them. Do this work or else you're thrown out onto the street. Allah Ta'ala has commanded us not even to speak harshly. Not even to speak harshly to the orphan. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. So as for the orphan, do not be harsh. Don't be harsh to the orphan. Who does he have after Allah but you? Who will console him after Allah but you? Who will make him feel better after Allah but you? He has no one after Allah but you. Of course, Allah Ta'ala, He forbade us from taking the money of the orphan without right, to consume it illegitimately. And what is fascinating about the prohibition in Surah An-Nisa is that it is in a verse. The previous verse tells us, if you fear for your children after your death, then fear Allah and speak the truth. And so Allah Ta'ala, He said, وَلْيَخْشَى الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضِعَافًا خَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. And let those who, if they are afraid to leave behind weak offspring, which they fear for, then let them fear Allah. And let them be mindful of Allah and speak the truth and speak justice. Then Allah warns those who illegitimately consume the wealth of the orphans. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا وَسَيَصْلَوْنَ سَعِيرًا. Indeed, those who devour the wealth of the orphans illicitly devour only fire. They only eat fire and put it in their bellies, and they will be cast or burnt or roast in the blaze. And Allah alludes to the following meaning, dear brothers and sisters, in these two verses. If you want your children to be cared for in the case that you die, and that the money you leave for them is maintained and protected and invested for them, then first of all, you fear Allah. You fear Allah. And then care for the orphans who are under your custody. Care for them and look after their money and don't consume it illegitimately. My dear brothers and sisters, a society's strength is measured by how well it cares for its neediest members. Providing a home and family for those who have been deprived one only strengthens our wider family. This ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the orphaned prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up our hearts and to make them big enough to accommodate not just our blood relatives, but our relatives in Islam. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the highest reward and the best company with the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in paradise. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على الحبيب المصطفى وبعد. My dear brothers and sisters, there are of course many forms of support which can be provided for the orphan, which will guarantee the lofty stations in paradise. The greatest form of support is to foster a child, to foster an orphan, opening your home to them and providing for them from your own pocket and from your own pocket only. Now, if that is not within your means, then that does not disqualify you from attaining the great reward. Because Allah Ta'ala only holds us accountable for what we are able to do. Allah Ta'ala tells us in Surah An-Nisa that the custodian and the guardian of the orphan is permitted to take from the orphan's money, from the orphan's inheritance, enough to cover the orphan's needs. They should, of course, invest that money and not let it be consumed by zakah or by the cost of living. But Allah Ta'ala, He said, وَمَنْ كَانَ غَنِيًّا فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ. The one who is rich, then let him refrain. If you have enough money, don't take from that money. But if you don't, وَمَنْ كَانَ فَقِيرًا فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. But the one who is poor, let him take what is appropriate for that child's well-being. And so, dear brothers and sisters, if there is no blame on the guardian from taking from from the orphan's money himself or herself, then of course there is no blame whatsoever on the guardian taking money from the state who provides an allowance for that child. Not only is there no blame, but there is abundant reward, and the reward of kafala, of care, of taking care and providing and sponsoring the orphan, even though you may not spend out of your own pocket, but you spend your effort. You expend effort. You give time. You give your emotions. You give your love. And all of that does not go unnoticed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in the case that you cannot foster a child entirely, nor open your home for a child and receive payment in return for that, that does not mean that we abandon orphans. We must strive to either individually or collectively sponsor the upbringing and care of orphans wherever they may be in the world, by paying every year to a charity a one-off sum, or setting up a direct debit so every month the child finds enough money for their education, for their food and for their drink and their accommodation and their clothing, and to live a dignified life which everybody deserves. What crime did they commit to be deprived? They're deprived of their parents first and foremost, which was out of their control. Then they are deprived of a dignified upbringing. This is a grave sin if we leave them neglected, if we abandon them. Now, do not say, but what will it, it's just something small. If I pay £1 a month, what's that going to do? Allah Ta'ala said, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. The one who does an atom's weight of good will find it on the day of judgment. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, do not consider anything, do not consider a good deed to be insignificant, even if it is that you meet your brother with a smile, with a cheerful countenance. Every good deed is recorded by Allah Ta'ala. Why do we only speak about bad deeds being recorded? Every good deed is recorded by Allah and multiplied by multiplied tenfold, up to 700-fold, and Allah, He multiplies more for whomever He wills. And so if you can't do anything, if you cannot do anything, you cannot give financially, then at least what you can do is show kindness to the orphan. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that whoever wipes the head of an orphan, and he does not do so except for the sake of Allah, not because he wants to get in the good books of that orphan's family, he does it for the sake of Allah, he will receive for every hair which his hand touches hasanat, many merits. My dear brothers and sisters, every so often we hear of heartbreaking tales of children whose parents die suddenly. Their parents do not leave a will behind stating who the custodians of their children should be in the case of their death. And so the children are taken into care. Brothers and sisters are separated for months and for years at times. And by the time family can reclaim their orphaned relatives, the children have undergone so much trauma. They enter homes which are strange to them. Different ethnicities, different religion, different lifestyle. This calls us first and foremost to ensure that we have wills which we sign, at least just on paper, which state in no uncertain terms who takes custody of our children in the case of our death. Second, this highlights the urgent need to recruit more foster carers for the Muslim community. Fostering, dear brothers and sisters, is an extremely rewarding role. The carer looks after a child or a young person for an agreed period of time. It's not indefinite. Working alongside a fostering agency or the local authority. There are a number of barriers, though, and misconceptions that deter Muslims from taking that step into fostering a child, despite us knowing the great reward and us desiring it. And today marks Foster Friday, which is part of the Muslim Foster Network's Foster Care Fortnight. Now, the Muslim Foster Network, dear brothers and sisters, supports potential foster carers through carrying out their own vetting system and one-to-one liaison with approved foster carers, or through their trained team members who interview potential foster carers. We know, dear brothers and sisters, that Muslim children are disproportionately represented within the care system. And we urgently need to work on bridging these gaps and making foster care a more accessible option for Muslims who wish to foster. Some of us have been blessed with spacious homes and abundant means. I ask you, by Allah, who will care for your children after your death or incapacity if you do not care for the children of others? Who will open their home to your children if you close your doors in the faces of others? The Aziz of Misr, the minister of Egypt's treasury, brought Yusuf alayhi salam as a slave from the market but didn't allow him to live a life of servitude. He said, as Allah Ta'ala quoted him as saying, وَقَالَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَاهُ مِن مِصْرَ لِامْرَأَتِهِ أَكْرِمِي مَثْوَاهُ عَسَىٰ أَن يَنْفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا. He said, and the one from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, make his residence comfortable. People who worship idols, people who didn't believe in Allah. He said, make his residence comfortable. Perhaps he will benefit us or we will adopt him as a son. Fir'aun, despite his crimes, which made him the worst human in human history, opened his home for the orphan baby Musa alayhi salam. Do you accept that Pharaoh would be more generous than us? I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to use us in the service of his creation, to open our hearts so that they are big enough to accommodate not only our family members, but the members of our wider family, the family of Islam. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه. هذا وصلوا وسلموا على خير الأنام فإن الله أمركم بأمر بدأ به بنفسه وثنى بملائكة قدسه ثم بكم أيها المؤمنون. فقال جل من قائل إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين وأعلِ بفضلك كلمتي الحق والدين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقم الصلاة.